Okay, so with weeks until they said they wanted to get a deal done, we are closing in on the final stages of the biggest sports media rights negotiation in Australian history. And for the first time in a long time, this is not just Nine versus Foxtel, because we've got Seven in the race. Amazon is in the race, and the biggest prize of them all, State of Origin, appears to be up for grabs. It's all on the table as the NRL aims for that big $4 billion price tag. So who's actually bidding? What do they want? And who's got the best chance of winning? Well, I'm going to break it down for you today. So let's get into it, because if you want to know what's really going on in sport, you've got to follow the money.
And now it's time.
It's time.
It's time for Moneyball. Moneyball.
Are you familiar with the story of Moneyball?
Hey team, welcome to Moneyball, Business of Sport, the show for sports insiders and for sports fans that want to know what is really going on in sport. I'm your host, Scott Keenan, and it is a doozy today. We're going to get stuck right into one of the biggest stories in sport right now. Real quick, before we get into that, if you do like the show, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or give us a review on Apple Podcasts when you get a chance. Now, the comments on this one have been absolutely going off. I've never seen so many shares or comments about anything I've posted online before. And what I realise is if there's one issue that all footy fans care about and have opinions on, it's how and where they watch their footy. And look, I can't read them all here now, but there were two key themes that I've seen coming up in my socials over and over the last few weeks. Some people are prepared to pay whatever it costs to get the best service and the best footy watching experience on the telly. No ads, 4K streaming, live and on demand. And then there are others who love what happens on free-to-air with what Nine does. And frankly, there are people out there too who can't afford to pay to watch the game that they love. So free-to-air TV does have a place in the hearts of a lot of NRL fans. But the question is, which way will the NRL go? Well, today I'm going to break down all of the key players for you, what I think they're in for, and I'll also give you my take on who could be in with a shout and who are the outsiders as the NRL goes after the biggest sports deal in Australian media history. Okay, so my thesis is pretty simple. There's two things really. One is that we are going to get change. It's pretty unlikely that we're going to see exactly the same thing that we've been experiencing with the NRL and the way we watch footy over the last 5 years or so be transplanted and to have the media companies just pay more for the same thing. So I think there's a good chance that the media mix, the media companies and the product that the NRL is serving up will change, if not a little bit, then quite a lot, to help the NRL get to that $4 billion price tag that they are looking for the deal. The other part of this is that Peter V'landys has done an incredible job here of turning this from a two-horse race into a much wider field. And what that bigger field does is it's created competition. So the last media deal was 5 years for a tick over $2 billion, and he said publicly that they want $4 billion or more for this next media deal over a 5-year period. Now, there's a few ways you can go about delivering that. I'll talk about some of those today. One is that you add more games and more teams into the competition. They've got Perth coming in 2027, but you've got to also remember that there is a depressed media market. The advertising sales for companies like Nine Entertainment and Seven are down substantially on where they were a few years ago. So they've got to find a way to make this commercially appealing and to help them get to the number that the NRL wants to get to. 12 months ago, I would say this looked very much like Nine versus Foxtel, and today it's pretty different. Seven has stated publicly that they are interested in the NRL. Foxtel has reportedly bid for everything, so has Channel 9. You got Amazon too. They have definitely made a bid and are interested. And for the first time in decades, State of Origin itself is up for grabs as well. And that is exactly what the NRL wanted. They want a contest because that is what will drive up the price. And they're not just selling a season of rugby league anymore. I suppose the other point that I want to make is that it is potentially selling a whole bunch of assets: State of Origin, weekly free-to-air games, streaming rights, subscription rights, finals and the grand final, future expansion inventory, and potentially, I'm not sure they'll go this far, but potentially new forms of content and access to the game itself for content creators and people on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. I think there is a whole big new world they could explore. Whether they do it in this deal or not, time will tell. But we're coming down to that deadline right now, and we're probably going to know pretty soon which way the NRL wants to go. The more bidders there are for these assets, the closer the NRL gets to that $4 billion price tag. So let's have a look at the field. So first up, we've got Foxtel and Kayo, which is owned by DAZN. It used to be owned by News Corp, and it was sold in the last 12 months to this European-based streaming business. And if I had to pick one company that I think simply cannot afford to lose the NRL, it is Foxtel. Fox League is one of the pillars of their entire business, and they've got all those magazine shows around the live broadcast as well, Matty Johns, The Fan, and so many others. Kayo's winter proposition is really built around the NRL in the eastern states and the AFL in the southern and western states. So it is super important. I've got to say, premium live sport is becoming more and more important to these businesses. And I've heard that DAZN has been extremely impressed with what they've bought here in Foxtel and Kayo. I actually think they're a little bit surprised by the quality of the product, the broadcast itself, and all of the magazine shows and panel shows that sit around it. That hasn't been part of their business model traditionally. It's been buy the rights, broadcast the game, that's it. And Foxtel, I think, is showing them what is possible with live sport, which is great. It's an Australian product which is being taken to the market and which is impressing its new owners, as I understand it. The biggest shift in my thinking here over the past month or so is that Foxtel now is not acting like a defensive incumbent in this bidding process. It's really behaving like an aggressive bidder. They have gone all out to get their hands on everything. The reports that we've seen in the Australian Financial Review are that it's pitched for all of the rights and it's exploring free-to-air partnerships with other businesses. I'm guessing 7 and 10 are probably the companies that they're talking to. Nine and Foxtel really are acting like aggressive opponents rather than maybe partners, how they may have been seen in the past. And unlike Nine, DAZN's global strategy is almost entirely built around premium sport. So while Nine has a wider business offering, a lot of their investment in news and some other sports, which I'll talk about, but for DAZN, it is all about live sport, and it is so vital to Foxtel. And the NRL rights are exactly the kind of asset that it understands, that it values, and that it knows how to monetize. They broadcast every single game live right now on the NRL. Of course, Kayo, as I said, heavily dependent on subscriber retention and acquisition, and the NRL is a beautiful product for that with so many weeks of games throughout the year. They are a long-standing partner of the NRL, well and truly more than 20 years. You know, we've seen the CEO, Patrick Delaney, has stated publicly that Foxtel does intend to compete aggressively for these rights. So, we can really look at them as a primary rights holder now, and they may see themselves as in the future, a primary rights holder that can sub-license some of the products that they will own if they win. To other companies, because there are, of course, laws in Australia that require some games, some big event, sporting events like State of Origin, like the NRL Grand Final, to be made available on free-to-air so that everybody can see them, just like we're seeing right now with the Football World Cup. So that's got to be part of the equation. Look, I reckon Foxtel does have a chance of winning a very meaningful package of games here like they have had before and assets that sit around the competition. And I put that really quite a high chance for them at 90%. I think it would be very unlikely that we see a situation where Foxtel and Kayo is not a big part of the NRL going forward. So let's go to Nine Entertainment and Stan Sport. That is an evolving business, and Stan, since the last time that this rights deal was done, I think back in 2022, there was an extension. Look, Stan has really grown, and it is a big product now, and sport is a really big part of the streaming offering that Nine Entertainment has. So Channel 9, 9 Now, and Stan Sport. And look, I think Nine remains in the box seat because it already owns the most valuable pieces of the game. It's got Friday night footy, Sunday afternoon footy. It's got the finals and grand finals, and it's got State of Origin, the jewel in the crown. And if rights were awarded simply on incumbency, well, you'd have to say that Nine would be the favourite. But there are legitimate questions about how aggressively Nine can bid, because the challenge isn't whether Nine wants the rights. Of course they do, but I think the challenge is whether they can justify paying materially more for the rights than they have in the past, while simultaneously kind of carrying one of the most expensive sports portfolios in Australian media. The ad market has been on the slide in the last few years, and it's harder and harder for local media businesses to compete with Google and with Meta and TikTok, where a lot of ad dollars have gone. YouTube is sucking up a ton of ad dollars as well. And that is a factor for Nine because their market capitalization and their resources internally means they can only go so far. And to me, this is starting to feel more like a Stan Sport negotiation with Nine, sort of tacked on in the hope that they can hold some of those free-to-air rights. They're not just trying to defend that free-to-air side of things. They are really in a face-off battle with Kayo, Stan Sport and Kayo in competition now. You've got these two big kind of sports streamers, local sports streamers in Australia, and I think that's where this fight is. I do think Nine has a meaningful chance of retaining some or all of the rights that they have. I'm not so sure that they are going to be in a position to materially compete for the whole thing, but you never know. It may be possible. We know that Nine has bid for the whole thing. They currently have, as I said, some Thursday, Friday and Sunday games, as well as the finals, grand final and State of Origin. They do have a bunch of other sports, though. They've got the Champions League and the Premier League. They've got all the big tennis tournaments, including the Australian Open and Wimbledon. They've got rugby and Super Rugby as well. They've just added the netball and the NBL too. So there's quite a lot of rights there that they're sitting with. Some on Nine on their free-to-air programming and some on Stan Sport. So, how much they're able to really push for the NRL, I'm not so sure. They have also reportedly sought to extend their ownership of the rights to the Premier League into the next decade too. So that's a financial commitment that will need to be considered, and that would sit on Stan Sport where it currently does at the moment. And as I said, television advertising remains under a lot of pressure. Hey, the other one too they've got is the Olympics too, so don't forget that. They have some really, really big sporting assets already. And this is a company too that has been, I guess, in a bit of a financial and structural transition at the moment. They've recently offloaded NBN TV in Newcastle to the Win Group, which actually owns part of Nine. It's a shareholder in Nine. They've offloaded some other assets too. Nine Radio, so 4BC, 2GB, 3AW, they've been sold off for about $56 million. And they've also written off and basically offloaded a number of other publications, small digital publications too, that were on their books. So they are cleaning house and they are trying to set themselves up for the future. How hard they can go in this competition, I think, is the big question. It's not really, does Nine want the NRL? It's just how much can they realistically afford to pay? So another player here is Seven and Southern Cross Media. They recently merged, so the radio company that owns the Triple M network and the Today network with the Seven Media Group, Channel 7 and 7 Plus. And I think they've gone from an outsider to more of a legitimate contender for some of the rights in the NRL over the last really few weeks, honestly. Like a year ago, I wouldn't have even considered Seven as a genuine player, even though they were starting to dabble in the end-of-season test matches. This year, they've added the panel show on a Monday night with Aaron Woods and Luke Keary and others, David Riccio from The Telegraph, and that seems to be doing okay. Now I think they are starting to go, okay, well, could rugby league be part of our ecosystem on Seven? And I think the key insight here is that Seven doesn't need the whole NRL for the economics to work. And they don't need the whole NRL to really, I guess, hurt Nine, which is their big competitor. State of Origin alone could fundamentally change its sports proposition, and it would really hurt Nine Entertainment. With AFL already dominating its winter schedule, like a targeted play for Origin and maybe like a premium weekly game might be a much more realistic strategy. And I know that the NRL has said that if they did want to break up State of Origin and give it to a broadcaster that isn't the same broadcaster for the rest of the weekly competition, they would also need to be able to broadcast one NRL match per week as well. The NRL is, of course, adding a match per week with a new team coming into the competition. So they go from 17 to 18 teams in 2027. And Look, I think that's smart, and I think that could be a play for Seven. I think that could work. The other thing that is of interest for Seven is if Foxtel wins all of the rights, they could become the free-to-air partner for some of those big games that they need to have broadcast on free-to-air to keep in compliance with those anti-siphoning laws that the Australian government has for those big sporting events that I referenced earlier. It is a bit of a dark horse here, and it is a different business to what it was 6 or 12 months ago. They've made a number of redundancies in the last week or so. About 300 people have been made redundant, which is sad to see. They're all Australian jobs across the Seven and Southern Cross media business. They do have a new CEO who has previously been at the head of Seven, went away for 10 years and has come back. He's a Queenslander and he is a publicly known rugby league supporter. And he's described State of Origin as one of the premier events on the Australian sports calendar. So he hasn't been backward about coming forward about rugby league on Seven. So reported interest includes State of Origin, one weekly game, maybe a Monday night football if it was introduced. That fits in really nicely with the rest of their calendar with the AFL from Thursday through to Sunday. And it would, I think, really give them a foothold into like a new property that doesn't currently exist, which they could monetize and which could be really great for the NRL, maybe having free-to-air on a Monday night on 7 and maybe some other games on 10 or 9. It is a surprising and kind of like a bit of an outside chance, but Origin does offer Seven a high impact, low inventory entry point into rugby league with a few key games that they can really monetize and make some big money on and I think contribute to maybe a new look and feel for that competition, which has been with Nine for a very long time. Though having spoken last week to Matt Thompson, who calls the rugby league for Nine and calls State of Origin, I think that business is really keen to retain that property. Whether they can afford to or not, how hard they can push, I'm not sure, but I think they'll do whatever they can to try to retain it because it is so essential to the Nine entertainment business. Okay, so let's change gears here a little bit and have a look at one of the global streamers, Amazon Prime Video. Now, they may not win most of the rights, but them coming in has definitely changed the negotiations. Its presence validates the belief that the NRL has that global streaming companies are prepared to get involved in negotiations for our media rights and for our sports competitions here in Australia. Let's be real, Amazon does not need the NRL to survive, but what it does want is a premium live sport as part of its broader ecosystem. And they've done this in other markets. They have one night of the NFL in the US. They've got a hockey game once a week in Canada, which is, of course, a big sport there north of the border. They have some European football in Europe where the Champions League, of course, is so popular. And this could be a way into another market that Amazon sees as really important for their business in the future. The AFR has reported that Amazon wants ownership of a dedicated weekly time slot, and they are also potentially interested in State of Origin, whether that's going to be acceptable or not, and whether they can be compliant with Australian law around that will be interesting. They may want to partner with a 7 or a 10 to, I guess, then give them a premium offering where you may subscribe to Amazon at a lower price. It might be $7.99, which is somewhere around there, or $11 for their subscription at the moment for the delivery service and Amazon Music and Prime Video. And if you were to subscribe to that, you could get access to one game a week of the NRL and State of Origin. I mean, that's not a bad proposition. It's not so expensive that you might think, well, I don't want to do that, because there are other benefits to it as well. You're not just paying for the streaming of Origin and that one game a week. Amazon Sports Chief Jay Marine has said publicly that they do want Premier Sports in every major Prime country that they operate in. So that does lead me to think that this is not just something that somebody's cooked up or a rumour that is being reported on. Sam Buckingham-Jones, who I've spoken with from the Australian Financial Review, has sourced a story that Amazon has bid, and it's pretty well thought that they have made a bid and that they are definitely interested. So this makes it a lot more interesting, where it's not just the original bidders and the local bidders. You've got Amazon coming in, looking at getting this kind of recurring subscription and retention of Australian customers through premium sport. There's a couple of others here worth touching on: Paramount Plus and Network 10, which hasn't had really a premium sports property for quite some time. They have a couple of the Formula One Grand Prix at the moment. I think actually it might just be the Australian Formula One Grand Prix. And there aren't too many other sports that they're currently broadcasting. And in a way, that might make them a decent choice to partner up with a Foxtel or an Amazon, or even be a bidder in their own right, because it's not just 10. It is also Paramount Plus, which currently has the Socceroos and the Matildas and the A-League football. That is the other sport that they do have on that platform. Really, since they lost the AFL back in, I think, 2015 and some other sports around 2018, the network has really been struggling. They've made a lot of job cuts. There's talk at the moment they could even outsource all of their news gathering and news programs to like a 7 or 9 and just shut down their news operation in order to save money. The thing that's happening with this company at the moment is that it's been bought by Skydance in the US. It's a really big media business now, and they've bought CBS and Paramount Plus and the streaming service and a number of TV stations, one in the UK, one in Australia here in Network 10. So they're in a little bit of a flux at the moment, and I'm not sure whether they're kind of in the right place to be bidding for a really big sport, especially one of the scale of the NRL in a market like Australia. But I wouldn't totally count them out, especially when I think there's the possibility that they could be a free-to-air partner for an Amazon Prime or for a Foxtel. I've got them at a really low sort of 15% chance of winning a meaningful package in this negotiation rights, if they're even bidding at all. But I think it is worth considering them on the fringe and keeping them in the back of your mind. The other one is Netflix. People ask me all the time, is Netflix going to bid? Why don't they go for the NRL? And I got to tell you, I just don't think that Netflix is a serious bidder, and not because they don't have deep pockets. Of course, they're a really big company. They're very successful at what they do. They're adding podcasting now to their platform. And I really do see them becoming a bit more of a competitor with YouTube over time. They've said that YouTube is not a competitor, but the way that they're starting to shape up their business, they want to win time spent watching, and they want you to spend more time on their platform, like all these streamers do, than their opposition. That allows them to kind of build that relationship with you and to keep you as a subscriber. And so Netflix has primarily been in the business of TV shows and movies, but more recently they have done a few interesting things. NFL games on Christmas Day, that really weird fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson last year, some very select programs in sport, but there is no credible reporting linking Netflix to a serious bid for the NRL. And there's also no history of acquiring a season-long sports competition here or anywhere else, I don't think. So Netflix is more about wanting events. NRL is a weekly commitment, and I really don't see them as a player in this NRL debate. I don't even have them here on my list. Apple TV is probably another one. They've got the rights for Formula One in the US. They've also got the MLS in the US, the Major League Soccer, but they're very focused on content in the US, and I really, again, don't see them here as a player in Australia and in the NRL negotiations for the rights for that competition. Okay, so how does the NRL actually get to that $4 billion plus figure? Well, this is the most important part of the whole discussion, I reckon, because they don't get there just by asking for more money. Could I please have $4 billion? It'd be nice, but that's not how these things work. It gets there by changing what is being sold. So the first lever here is fragmentation. Instead of selling one package, the NRL can sell multiple premium assets. State of Origin, Friday Night Football. They can bring in a new asset like Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, a game, at 6:30 or 7 p.m. Streaming rights, subscription rights, finals, the grand final. There's a lot of properties that they could potentially break out and sell separately, or they could package them together like Nine and Stan and like Foxtel and Kayo would like, but in the knowledge that there are other businesses out there that would like parts of what is being sold, and that is what will drive the price up for, a Foxtel or a Nine. They're going to have to go all out to win all of it. And in Foxtel's case, they'll get some of that money back by on-selling some of the rights to a 7 or a 10, or maybe even to 9 if they want to do business together. The second lever is expansion. The NRL is already adding the Perth Bears in 2027, which I'm excited to see come into the competition again. It's been a long time since the hoops of the Bears have been in the NRL, and it's going to be exciting to see games back at North Sydney. But I've also been to games at HBF Park in Perth, and it is a great place to watch footy. And I think it's going to be, a really good team over time. I think fans will get involved over there, and I think the brand is strong enough to build into something important over time. Of course, Papua New Guinea as well in 2028. The Chiefs will come in as the 19th team in the NRL, another uneven number, which makes me think that a 20th team might not be that far away. More games means more broadcast inventory, so it's more products that the NRL can sell. And it's more games that the broadcasters can promote and sell advertising in and sell subscriptions to as well. There have been reports that some broadcasters would like to see a 20th team introduced sooner than maybe what the NRL had been thinking, because for them, that extra game, so going from 9 games next year to 10 games quite quickly would mean more content that they can monetize. So that's pretty interesting, and that was a little bit of a surprise when that was reported on in the last couple of weeks. I think it's quite entrepreneurial, and it's interesting to see the media companies really pushing the NRL for that, because it has felt like the NRL has been driving this and saying what it was that they wanted, even though, of course, they've asked for the media companies to bid on what assets they would like. The third lever that could be pulled on here is changing the product itself. Around the world, sports leagues are increasingly selling access and content, not just the matches. So, for example, the NFL has normalised miking up players, coaching audio. We see that in the NBA and in the NBL, particularly here in Australia, and behind the scenes access. And the NBA is another example which has of a competition that has a really creator-friendly highlights ecosystem that helps to spread social media content across, the creator economy, I guess. And the Premier League is doing a bunch of that too. They create enormous amounts of in-house content, and they actively collaborate with content creators and digital publishers to get that out there more beyond the companies that are broadcasting the games. And that's not something that we've seen here from the NRL. I know from talking to content creators across the NRL that the NRL actually comes down pretty hard on creators who are using imagery and particularly video, even filming their own TV and talking to highlights from games if they don't have the rights. And of course, content creators do not have the rights. So this is something the NRL could look at. They could move in a similar direction to some of these other competitions. It could be controlled change room access for the media and even for content creators and journalists to go in and talk to them after the game. That's not something that happens here in Australia, but it does happen overseas. And we could see players getting mic'd up during marquee events, or even hearing more from coaches during the game. I know Nine does it during State of Origin with Billy Slater, and they did it with Freddie previously when he was the coach of New South Wales, but it's not something that's common in the game, whereas we see it a lot more in the NBL here in Australia. We're starting to see more documentary-style content. Manchester United and Amazon Prime have teamed up to do one next season, and we'll see the result of that at the end of the year. But we don't see a lot of that in the NRL. Tiger Town, of course, was that famed documentary series that Fox League did a few years ago when Madge Maguire was the coach. And look, it didn't make them look great, but it was real, and we got to look inside the team and we got to understand what it looks like inside the walls a little bit more. And fans love that. So could that access be part of this new media rights deal? And I think, questions about, how players, arrive at the ground and run out. Can we see them when they're arriving at the ground? And can content creators partner with the NRL or with the broadcasters to get access to certain highlights that can be used for their channels to allow them to talk about the game to their audience? That can't be a bad thing. There must be a way where those highlights, some select highlights could be made available for content creators to talk about the game that they love. And I think that's something that has to be considered, because the way to get to $4 billion isn't just more money through subscription and advertising. It's about more rugby league, more games, more content, more access, and more ways to distribute it. and more competition, of course, between the buyers.
Moneyball.
Okay, this has been a big breakdown today, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I can't wait to read the comments on this one. Please jump into the comments if you're on YouTube or Spotify, or you can send us an email anytime you like, askmoneyball@gmail.com, and let me know what you think. Slide into the DMs on Instagram. Keen to hear your views, because this is a topic that people are so passionate about, and I've been really interested with how heated the comments and conversations have got on Instagram over recent weeks when I've been posting about this. There's a few scenarios here. So I think one is that Foxtel and Kayo could become the primary rights holder. That is a possibility. Foxtel could acquire the full rights and then sub-license the required free-to-air games to another broadcaster. It could be the 7 network, it could be 10 and Paramount Plus, it could also be 9. It depends who offers the best commercial outcome and I guess who they want to work with. It'll be down to them, but it will be important that they comply with those anti-siphoning rules that are set by the federal government for big sporting events like the grand final and for State of Origin. There's a possibility that Nine and Stan could win all of those rights too, and then they wouldn't necessarily have to deal with anybody else unless, for example, the NRL then also decides that we do want to have another property on a Monday night. We do want Monday night footy, and we want to sell that to Amazon, or we want to sell that to 7. Now, Nine could also bid for that too, and they may well have. But again, it just comes down to brass tacks and how much they can afford to pay for. A lesser chance sort of scenario that I see is where Nine and Foxtel renew like a version of what they currently have split, but at a significantly higher price. I don't think that is a likely outcome. I think it's possible, but I think there's going to then have to be more product. There's obviously the extra game, but other things that the networks will want in order to get to that higher price point for sure. I think there is a chance that 7 or Amazon could win State of Origin or another standalone product like a new Sunday night footy, a Monday night footy. I don't think that's out of the question. I think Foxtel and DAZN are really heavily and strongly in for everything. I think they've been super impressed with the product that Foxtel has here, and DAZN sees how important it is to their business. It is a strong possibility that there could be a property carved out to another media company to spread the love around, and so that the NRL doesn't have all of its rights locked up with one business. And I think that probably would be quite smart, honestly, because it spreads their risk a little bit, and it means they get to work with a few different media companies and partners, and that there's more conversation and more positivity and more content about the NRL across multiple media companies. And I think they'd like to see that. And I think, there is a chance that Amazon could secure a weekly exclusive game as well. I wouldn't write that off. I don't think they're just in there to make up the numbers or to drive the price up. I think there's a pretty good chance that they could win something here, and that would be a game changer. It'd be really interesting to see. I think as a fan and as a watcher, I'd be a bit annoyed having to get multiple subscriptions, but that is the way that the world is going. And right now, the NRL is chasing those big dollars. The one thing to remember is that Peter V'landys has said on more than one occasion, he doesn't want fans to have to pay a whole lot more than they currently are now. And I think that is one of the big considerations that will play across all of these bids over the next couple of weeks. Well, look, these next couple of weeks are going to be absolutely fascinating. And for the first time in decades, really, there are genuine challenges to the traditional broadcasting order. But the real story isn't just who wins, because it's about what they do with the games when they get them. For the first time, the NRL is now not just selling a competition, it is selling an ecosystem, a content platform, a variety of properties that media companies want to get their hands on, and it will change the shape of the sport in the future. I don't think we're going to just see a recast of what we've had for so many years with Foxtel and Nine sharing the rights. I think there's going to be a bit of a shake-up. I'll stand up and say that I was wrong if it comes to that, but I'm pretty sure that is what we're going to see. Jump in the comments and tell me, who do you think should win the NRL rights? Should State of Origin stay with the Nine network? Would you watch the NRL on Amazon Prime? Or do you reckon Foxtel and Kayo and Nine and possibly Stan, should they all remain the natural home of rugby league in this country? If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe for more breakdowns of the business of sport. You can follow the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you can email me anytime as well, askmoneyball@gmail.com. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode. I can't wait to hear what you think about all of this too. Jump in the comments and get busy. And remember, if you want to know what's really going on in sport, you've got to follow the money. I'll see you next time.